Welcome to the Sisterhood Collective podcast, where we empower women to break barriers, overcome limiting beliefs, and achieve true success. I'm your host, Laurie Drummond, entrepreneur and founder of 5 successful businesses. Join me as I share proven strategies, interview inspirational leaders, and provide behind-the-scenes insights to help you level up in your business, career, and in life. Because together, we can get further faster. Okay, let's dive in. So welcome back to another episode of the Sisterhood Collective podcast. Today I have a very special guest and my friend, Laurie. She has an incredible story to share, and we talk about this quite often when we catch up. So Laurie is a former FBI agent who has navigated some challenges of working in this male-dominated industry. And she's had to deal with some really quite hard and tough cases, like some of the things that are just not imaginable. We're going to dive into her experiences, the mental toll of her work, and how she's managed to stay resilient and motivated through it all. So this episode is all about finding strength in isolation and continuing to strive for more, no matter what obstacles you're faced with. So hi, Laurie.
Hi, Laurie.
I thought we'd jump straight in today. Can you share a little bit about your journey to becoming an FBI agent and what inspired you to pursue this career?
Absolutely. So I graduated from college with a business and psychology degree. And then I thought I might want to be an attorney. So I went to paralegal school and started working for a law firm. And then they wanted me to be one of their investigators. So I started getting really addicted to the investigation part of my work. So sort of the next track was to see if I could become an FBI agent. And so I applied. It was a very long process. It was a 1.5-year process. I didn't tell anybody in my family or my friends that I had applied. So when I finally got through the whole process and when it was accepted, it was pretty much a shock to myself and everyone else, but definitely a blessing and such an opportunity that I was given.
Tell me, what was it like working in a male-dominated field like the FBI?
Well, I'll start with this. So you're sent to Quantico, which is where we trained for 4 months, 16 weeks. And so out of a class of 30, I think there was 30 or 40. I think there might have even been 40 plus. There were 6 females. So when I started, it was about 10% females. So everything from the very beginning, when you drive onto the Quantico base to do training, is male dominated. The instructors are mostly male. My colleagues were mostly male. And it takes time to maneuver that and to sort of make your stance in that male dominated field. You know, it starts immediately and you sort of have to start figuring things out and supporting your other females as you move along.
Tell me, what were some of the challenges you faced?
So at Quantico, it's very physically driven. There's a lot of shooting of guns, which I had done. My dad had actually started teaching me how to shoot when I was little. So that wasn't as challenging, but the physical part of it, all the running and the push-ups, the pull-ups, things that women just aren't physically as strong at, were challenges. And that part of it was difficult. And the other part was basically you had to study and things like that, which is, everyone has the same ability to do that. But then we've got defensive tactics where we're attacking another person or they're attacking us and we have to defend ourselves. And actually, I became so conscientious of my size and compared to my male partner that I would actually sometimes get a little too aggressive. But it was, it taught both of us. And so So that was pretty much at Quantico. And then you move to your field office, which I was assigned to Chicago. And just, I had one other female on my squad, and thank goodness she took me under her wing. And she had 12 years my senior. She was 12 years my senior, and really took me under her wing. And we still call each other sister, because she's just was the one that sort of indoctrinated me into everything, being in a new office filled with male and a lot of male egos. Males tend to have a lot more ego than women do, and they kind of are, they exist and they are who they are because of what their ego is. And I'm not putting them down, because I had a lot of males in my career who were very helpful and who were very supportive, but then you also had the challenges of men who still didn't believe that women belonged in the FBI.
It's similar because I was in the army and I went through training both at Kapuka and then also at the military college a few years later. But one of the things that I found was a big challenge for myself was that I was constantly trying to prove myself. And that has literally played on my entire career. And it's probably why it's one of those things where I feel like I'm constantly trying to prove myself. And it stems from back then when, you know, it was one of those things I felt like I had to work twice as hard just to be seen. And, you know, I am driven, and I feel like perhaps that's women in the FBI and, you know, any sort of military kind of space. We're a driven character. It's a specific character trait that does those sorts of jobs. But we're trying to prove ourselves all the time. So we work super, super hard, and sometimes harder than the men. And you may resent some of that sometimes, but either way, it's a challenge. It's a challenge to be seen. It's a challenge to get promoted or to go for a specific job. Tell me, how did you overcome that kind of situation for yourself to keep moving forward and even just stay in the FBI as long as you did?
Well, you know, it's funny that you bring some of those things up, because I've always said that women have had to work twice as hard to get half the respect. And yes, we're all very driven. I mean, we're all very competitive. I remember you had to do this run before you could even get into the FBI. And it was about 95 degrees in Miami with 100% humidity. And you had to do a 1.5 mile run in so many minutes. And I got there, and there were like 5 males and me and another female. And I'm like, I know I'm not going to beat the males, but I cannot be last. So I literally, at one point, and she was the tiniest little thing. She looked like a runner. So I'm thinking, oh boy, I know I'm not going to beat the males, but I've got to beat her. And when I lapped her, I thought I was going to die when I finished it, but it was worth it because I beat her. So that's the mentality that I think you should have as an FBI agent, because you've got to overcome a lot of things, and you've got to be prepared mentally if you are, you know, doing an arrest or you're in a bad situation. Got to have that headstrong perseverance. But the one thing you said too was about respect and people not working as hard. I recall working in the Chicago office in a satellite office where we did all violent crimes. So every violent crime violation was worked in our office. And so we were working nights, weekends. You know, you'd come in one day and you have a whole list of things to do, and all of a sudden you have a kidnapping and you're out for 3 or 4 days. It just is how it happened. But I remember, and my old partner remembers this very clearly, that the guys would come in and talk football and kind of go cubicle to cubicle, talking. Well, we were working a big human trafficking case, and we were so busy that we stopped coming into the office. We would sit at my dining room table and do the reports, because we were being interrupted by the guys who weren't doing their job. And we were, and they, when we got 3 life sentences out of it, they said, "Oh, you were working. We thought you were getting pedicures." And we're like, so that's kind of, maybe it was said it jokingly, but it was thought to be said, if you know what I mean.
All those comments though, and those little niggles must have played on your mind and played on your, insecurities or your self-esteem in the job. Or tell me, how did you deal with things like that? What were you doing? What did you do when that sort of comment was said to you?
I think success is the best remedy for getting back at those. So I just continued to strive for success and work very, very hard in everything I did. And I remember talking to, if you recall, the first agent that took me under her wing. I called her one day from the office that I was in, where the guys just stood around and talked about football all day. And I said to her, it's really upsetting to have these guys walking around not doing they're just have this cush job all day, and I'm running around in circles chasing my tail, sometimes working 14, 15 hours a day and weekends, and they get paid the same as I do. And her response was, if you think that way, it's going to really hurt your mental capabilities to continue to work as hard as you do. She said, you work as hard as you do because that is who you are. That is ethically who you are. That's morally who you are. So don't think about the people around you and how their morals and ethics, because you can't ever change it. That stayed with me through my entire career. I always thought of that when I felt a little shortchanged and very overworked at times. And, and they're standing around talking about football.
I love that kind of value. It's a personal value that's instilled with you from, childhood, and the influences that you have had. And hence why I still work as hard as I work. It doesn't matter what anybody says to me. And, even just the other day, my mum was on the phone to me and she's like, honey, you just have to do what's right for you. Don't worry about anybody else. I'm like, yes, Mom, that's exactly right. And I'm definitely getting better at that. And I think that's something your mentor at the time, your friend or mentor, has given you such great advice that you pass on to others. And it's so, so important is to be authentic, stay true to you, don't be influenced.
Absolutely. And when I left my law firm, one of the attorneys, he was a partner in the law firm, very, very well respected in the community. And he gave me this book, and it was a fiction book, but it was about the FBI. And he said that he had read it and he had really enjoyed it, and he wanted to pass it on, given that I was going in the FBI. And he wrote in there that he said, you are such a good, sweet, honest person. He said, never shy from who you are. Always stay true to yourself. Always be who you are, no matter what the situation is. And I've always remembered that as well. And what kind advice from someone who was probably pushing 70 years old at the time. And I've never forgotten that either. And I will tell you, no matter where I was, what I did, I always remember that. And here's the thing, women we're more emotional beings. That is who we are. So I remember being really upset, and I was actually angry. When I get really angry, the tears come out, and it's not weakness. It's not sadness. It's not anything. It's anger. Like if you ever see tears coming out of my eyes, you probably want to leave the room because I'm angry. And what he didn't know was that fact about me. And he said something very derogatory and nasty to me. And the tears started coming down, and I walked away, and he asked me to go to lunch the next day. And at lunch, he said, I never want to see you cry again. That is a big sign of weakness. And I looked at him and I said, oh, do not mistake those tears for weakness. I was so angry. I walked away from you because if I didn't, I might have done something to you to hurt you. And I was so angry about what he had said. So, but we're looked at as if we're weak if we show any emotion, especially in a male dominated field. But that's how we're wired. When I had to tell the parents of the little girl, that the 3-year-old that was killed, and I solved the case, and I told the parents we had found their baby's killer. I held my composure while I was in there, but when I walked out of that room, I lost it, because we are different than men. We just are. We're wired different. We're more emotional. So that's what I think men don't understand. And they perceive that as a weakness sometimes, when, it's really not. It's just who we are.
Of course. And so how do you navigate that? Because here's the thing. Half of the jobs that you've done, like I know that you have done some undercover work from speaking to you before. So that's basically classified information. So you go out on a job, you can't tell anybody about these cases. And I know for some of your cases, they have been about children, which is extremely hard for us because we have this innate mothering kind of
Instinct.
That's the word. So we have this mothering instinct here and some of your cases have been to do with child abuse or trafficking or whatever, some sort of abuse in some case, but you can't talk to people about it. And it has to impact you from a female perspective, but just from a human perspective anyway. And you're quite isolated in a situation like that. And I imagine you've got partners there, but if your relationship doesn't allow you to kind of talk to them about this sort of thing, who do you turn to?
So when I was working human trafficking and child exploitation and what do you call it? They were prostituting these children, young girls. My partner was a female. So that made it a million times better. However, the men did not think that was worth working. They thought that it was the gangs and drugs that were like the big macho thing to work, and they're like, you can't save the world. Well, you can save one at a time. You can save a girl at a time. And I will tell you that, without getting into too much detail, I'll tell you a very heartfelt case of one of our pimps prostitutes, and she was actually his girlfriend. So they actually have girlfriends, but then they have other girls that they prostitute out. Well, he used to beat her so badly that he had broken her nose 24 times. Her name was Shiloh. And so when we interviewed Shiloh on several occasions, she was very, very hardened, very hard to get any information out of. When she testified at trial, she actually mouthed "I love you" at her boyfriend, even though he had done, it's almost like the Munchausen's by proxy or Munchausen's issue. So her brothers, she had 2 brothers that were very involved and dealt with myself and my coworker. And about 1.5 years ago, one of the brothers sent us a picture of her. She had just graduated from nursing school. Now, if that doesn't mean that we did something to save her, I don't know what does. Because we gave those guys, or they got there were 3 life sentences in that case, and one of them being her boyfriend. So yes, women are looked upon as having that more nurturing side of them to work those kinds of cases, to save our women, and the boys don't quite see it that way. They see it as, we need to be working gangs and drugs and getting the drug dealers off the streets. Yeah, we do. Absolutely. But that's another war. But if we can save a girl at a time, then we've done our job. But you are working against the grain of people who do not think that it's worth working.
How do you cope with the emotional and mental toll of that sort of work?
You know, for me, I learned from my father unknowingly. So my father never brought his work home. He never talked about work at home. And unknowingly, I was able to take on that trait. So I didn't dwell on it at home. And I think I learned how to compartmentalize a lot of the bad things I saw to be able to move on with life when I was home. You know, there were one or two cases that really, you know, they keep you up at night and they haunt you. But I learned to compartmentalize, and I have my other female agents that I talk to. I would talk to my husband sometimes about things if I could, but he was wrapped up in his work, was really a big job as well. So it was really, you know, relying on the other female agents that kind of were feeling the same things that I were, that we talked about it. And otherwise I compartmentalized and just did the best I could.
Do you have anything now that still haunts you from the days in the FBI?
So the one case that I solved, that the little girl was 3 years old when she was killed, I was so happy I was able to solve the case. And it was a lot of legwork and a lot of basic interviews with a lot of people. But I think what haunts me the most is sitting there and telling her parents that we had found who killed their child, and opening those wounds up that were not healed, but it had been 7 years. So it was a cold case, and I just felt like I had ripped that Band-Aid off, or more likely torn a huge cast off of a broken arm, you know. And to see their grief and what they were going through again, I'll never forget that. And then the mom calling me over and over again, because at that time they only wanted a few details. They couldn't take all the details at once. It was like swallowing from a fire hose, all the information that I had found. And I was actually finally able to tell them the investigation, who it was, how we found them, and then, you know, I only got to so much of what he had done to her until they were like, we can't take anymore. And then little by little, like once a week, the mom would call me and ask for a little bit more detail. And that absolutely haunts me. And at one point, what does haunt me is that I wasn't sure that she wasn't involved. I wasn't sure her husband wasn't involved, or her ex-husband at the time. They had eventually divorced because he had been put in prison for a while for her murder and then released. So now to face the fact that, you know, I had to be hard and I had to ask hard questions to people that were her mom and dad, knowing now that they had nothing to do with it, that's hard.
You've mentioned that from a support strategy perspective, you had your ex-female partner and mentor, and occasionally you speak to your husband, or you compartmentalize anything. What other support systems did you rely on to maintain your mental health during those rough times?
That was about it. I mean, it was my faith. There was things that I would do I was avid at working out. Every morning I would get up and go downstairs to the basement and do my workouts. In fact, I remember my boss calling me a few times and saying, can you come in right away? And I'm in the middle of a workout, so I shower quickly and go in with a suit on and a pile of wet hair on my head. But, you know, working out, friends, a lot of girlfriends, a lot of girlfriends in my neighborhood that I had at the time that were amazing support system. So very, very supportive and a great sisterhood.
So basically creating a tribe of supporters and women that make you feel safe, make you be your best version, support you, and there for you when you need them.
Absolutely. And not only in work, but it's really important to have those sisterhood relationships that they have nothing to do with your work. They're doing their management, or they're doing this, or they're doing that in completely different fields, because when you're working with females, that's what you tend to talk about even in your off time. But when you are in sisterhood with other women that are in jobs that have nothing to do with law enforcement, it really brings that other side of you out to just have joy and fun and just go dancing, or go, do what girls do together, do what women do together, just to, sometimes be silly and have fun and laugh. And, that's what sisterhood is. And it's supporting each other no matter how down someone is. They're there to bring you up. And that's what it's about. It's not all about good times. It's about being supportive through hard times.
Interestingly, right at the start, you mentioned that you were doing like a fitness assessment of sorts, and there was another girl, and you're like, I just have to beat the men, or as many of them as I can, but I have to beat this, little young chick. And, that sort of environment, because I remember it too, what it does is it ends up pegging woman against woman, as opposed to coming together and supporting each other, and maybe even just running through it together, going, hey, let's just get through this together, and running together, getting the same time, crossing the finish line together in this union of support. And those situations, there's a lot of industries that have more men, I guess, working in that space, where women are, I guess, we're still a minority. But instead of joining forces and being stronger together, we are pit against each other. And you said it, all I wanted to do was beat her. And then now you're saying, but my, women are the best things, and I need that connection and that friendship and stuff. But it's not your fault or anything like that, but it's because it happened to me. And I sit there and think, it really gave me this introduction, because it was when I was 17, I joined the army, and there was the introduction to the female friendship or connection was not there. It was just strive to be the best version that you can be in this space, but it wasn't healthy. And it was after all of that where I realized how much I need the women,
Right.
my besties, my friends, my tribe, my circle. I need that. I love that. And I want more of it, because what I was taught isn't right. And it most certainly wasn't the healthiest version of me. I don't necessarily know if I even like that version as much as I like this version that exists now. And so there's a lot of women out there that are in these isolated spaces, whether they're working from home, working overseas, they're deployed, working in a male-dominated industry. My question is, what advice would you give to a woman that feels isolated in that professional environment?
So I would say, first of all, to have her female friends outside of her work, because I cannot say that all of my relationships with other female agents were amazing. You have some that are great. I mean, I was very reluctant to like my old partner, Carrie, because the prior female that I had worked with was very hot and cold, and we could go to lunch on a Friday, and then she would come in Monday and wouldn't talk to me for 2 weeks. And it was very confusing to me, because I knew I hadn't done anything wrong, or said anything to offend her, because I didn't have the chance, and I just didn't understand it. So I think sometimes, you get that too in a workplace. It's not always a beautiful friendship, but I think that you have to be open to new friendships coming in and giving people other people chances. But I think the isolation part of it, you have to seek out others that you're drawn to and really form those bonds and those relationships. And it takes effort. Relationships take effort, and relationships are not a one-way street. They're a two-way street. And if you and I have talked about this, if you feel that, you're the only one giving after a certain amount of time, it's time to give that up. But I always make sure that I do a check within myself to make sure I'm giving enough, because we all get very busy. I've lived all over the world, so I've made friends everywhere I've been, and it's hard to keep up with everybody. So just to do a mental check sometimes and say, am I being a good enough friend? But I guess I probably haven't answered your question with the isolation. I think it's being confident enough in yourself to seek out others to start forming bonds and relationships. And look, when you're working together, you have like goals, and you have and yes, there is some pitting sometimes against each other, but that's the worst thing you can do, and it's immature. And I think the more mature we get, the more we know that we need the sisterhood bonds, and that we should only be here to support each other. And if that relationship isn't good for us or is toxic in any way, then it's okay to step away from it as well.
I was talking to a client this morning, and I literally just said, which I say all the time, it's okay to have somebody in your life that's with you from point A to point B. And it's also okay that they are not on the journey with you from point B to point C. And I think that is something that we need to be really aware of, and also know that that's okay. And here's the thing, they may come back in your life at, like point F or something like that. They may come back in, and that is also okay. But don't keep people around if they're either sucking the energy and the life out of you, or they've got this negative influence, or their life is just going in a different direction. I think it's okay to just back off just that little bit, or cut ties altogether, depending on the thing. And I think the key to what you're saying right there is, if you're isolated, stay connected. Maintain those relations. It's, for 2 seconds, it takes about 15 seconds to send a text message or a WhatsApp or some sort of email of sorts, just to check in with people.
Absolutely. And I'll say this, I mean, there are certain things in life, whether it's work or whether it's personal, that get you down. And the more isolated you are, the harder it is to get out there. So it's really important to notice maybe when that slippery slope is starting, and to make sure that you do reach out, and you do reach out to those people that that support you the most, and they will get you through those times. They will help you. But everyone goes through ebbs and flows, and when you're in those, it's most important that you don't isolate yourself. And in the work that I've done, where it can be very negative and very depressing and very frustrating, it's highly important that you find that outlet, whatever that is, to make you happy. And I'll point out that it needs to be a healthy outlet, not copious amounts of alcohol or things that are just gonna end badly. It's just finding that healthy route that can help you get through and make sure that you're not isolated. And I remember, I'll give you an example. When I was living in Turkey with my husband after I retired, I didn't know anybody, and he traveled 95% of the time. And here I am in a foreign country. No one speaks any English. The only thing, thank goodness, I had my dog and 2 cats with me. So we would walk every day. But I remember I was in that apartment alone so much. And I remember going to the ambassador had a Christmas dinner and we were invited, and had anxiety about going because I hadn't been around people in a while. And when we got there, this seating was so that you didn't sit with your spouse. Well, I thought I was going to lose it because I hadn't maintained my social skills for months. And I was scared to death. And all these people knew each other. And here I was sitting at a table where all these people knew each other, and they tried to include me, but it was a very isolating feeling. So you just have to, move on, but it's not forgettable. It was not a forgettable evening. It's not a good feeling.
But okay, so you went through that experience. What did you do after that then to integrate yourself back into connecting with people? And the reason I ask this is because we are working from home, we are online more often than not, we're using AI and automated emails and posts and things like that. So we're actually not having to engage with people and communicate like we used to. And so, this is a real problem that's coming up. And so you're in this situation where all you've been talking to is your puppy and your two cats,
Right.
where they're not talking back. You get thrown into an event, a Christmas evening where you're sitting next to people you don't know. So you've got to do the chit chat, the small talk, which nobody really likes to do. And but you're not feeling good about yourself because you haven't spoken to people. So how do you get past that? That evening's happened, you've passed on, it's a new year. What are you doing to integrate back into and improve your social skills?
So in the new year, so right after that, I came back to the States for a few weeks, and we were actually looking for homes. My husband and I both came back and stayed with my family, and then I decided to go back to and do some part-time work, which enabled me to be around people socially and do that. Now I do see the problem with more at home remote working and all that. And I do think that it's going to take more of an effort now to maintain a social life and your social skills, because it is, the more you are isolated, the more comfortable you get with that isolation. And it's actually a little bit scary to go back out there. So, and we as people, we need that aspect. And some of us are true introverts, and the only way to recharge our batteries is to have some me time for a while and do that. But then we are ready to get back into that social life. True extroverts, they recharge their batteries by being around other people. So they don't normally run into the isolation as much because of who they are and how they are. But yeah, I think it is going to be a problem the more people work remotely and aren't going. That's what I miss almost the most about not working in the FBI, is not going to an office every day and being around people that I absolutely admired and loved to be around. And I always say, if you don't have fun at work, you shouldn't be working there. You have to have fun with what you're doing, because most of the time you're at work more than you are actually at home if you're working outside of the home.
Now that you don't have yourself in the position where you're admiring other people, going in every day, connecting with people and, talking and things, how do you think that for other people that are in a similar situation these days, they're not going into work or anything like that, how do you create a network of this that helps you feel empowered and creates or allows you to become more resilient?
Well, I feel like I empowered myself. So I went through a pretty hard time when COVID hit, because I was overseas and I didn't have a home in the US, and I got locked out of going back to Turkey where I was living. And so I had to go back and live with my parents for several months before I finally found a house, which was like 5 to 6 months. And I hadn't seen my husband or my animals in 8. So it was kind of a dark time for me. And I called a friend of mine, actually a male friend, who has always been very supportive and very good friend to both my husband and I. And I talked to him for a long time. And so one of my skills with the FBI was as a polygraph examiner. And he said, "Where are you with that?" And I said, "I don't know. I mean, I retired, a year and a half ago, and I don't know where I am." And he said, "Well, is everything current?" And I said, "I don't know." And he said, this was kind of late at night. He said, "Tomorrow morning, the first thing I want you to do when you wake up is I want you to contact the different organizations that you belong to and see if you're still active." And he said, "And I think the best thing you could do is to go back into the field that you know best." And I woke up the next morning and I did. I did. And I started my own business when I got settled where I am now after retirement. And that's what empowers me. When I get a call from an attorney and he says, "I have a client in jail and I don't think he did it. But can you do a polygraph and see, if he did this horrible thing?" And I go in and I polygraph the guy and he's completely passes my polygraph. That's empowering. It's empowering to be able to help people like that. So I think that no matter what stage of life you're in, you have to develop a purpose and you have to develop a reason to wake up every morning. And you have to continue to be proud of yourself and what you do and what you contribute.
Yeah, 100%. At the end of the day, you've got to have purpose. And to be honest, the only person that can make the change is you. And you are empowered with choice. You get to make the decisions on which way you want to go, what you want to do, what change you want to make, or if you want to sit in front of the couch and do nothing all day. That power is yours. So I think the one thing we need, and like even when I talk to, my parents, it's like when they retire, you need purpose. You need a reason to get up every day. And so it's the same when you're in a dark place, you need to find a reason. And so if that means leaning into a friend or talking to a friend like you did who can help you navigate that, then that's what you need to do. But again, even getting to that step when you're in such a dark place, it's so hard. However, you have the power. When we talk about empowerment, it's your choice to pick up the phone, write the text message or the email and ask for help.
Absolutely. And I will add this, that when I was in that dark time, so when my husband came back from Afghanistan, he was with DEA and they did a reintegration training with DEA. It was very, very good. And they wanted the spouses to come too because the separation and the times when there were bombings there and I didn't know if he was alive or dead. And, that was a whole separate thing that I went through when I was working a lot of hours. But the spouses came and they had this psychologist there. His name is Harvey Goldstein. And we became very good friends with him. And I remember talking to my husband when I was in that sort of dark place. And he said, "Will you talk to Harvey?" And I said, "Yes." And so he contacted Harvey and had Harvey call me. And I want to really impress the fact that it is not a sign of weakness to get in touch with somebody that is a professional that can help you navigate that. So I had my friend helping me navigate it, and I had Harvey helping me navigate, and I pushed through it and came out great on the other side. But we have to realize that sometimes we need that, and we can become even better on the other side because of that help that we ask for.
I absolutely love that. And that is actually a true strength that you have right there. Lori, thank you so much for joining me today. You are one inspiring woman. I love your story. Your journey has been absolutely incredible. Like you've done so many different things and you literally have changed people's lives. And I realize our listeners, because they come from all different backgrounds, but they're going to find a lot of strength and motivation from your experiences. I think to everyone tuning in, remember, no matter how isolated, disconnected, or challenged you may feel in your journey, there's always a way to navigate through and come out stronger on the other side. Let's continue supporting one another. And until next time, get out there, continue to be your best self, be the artist of your own life. You are not alone. And if you feel you need connection, you are most welcome to join our free room that is all about inspiration, motivation, and connection. It is the Sisterhood Collector Room, and the link is in the show notes, or you'll find it on our Instagram page. Thank you, and we'll catch up with you again soon. Thank you for joining us on the Sisterhood Collective podcast. Remember to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss out on any upcoming episodes. And if you want to be the first to hear what is new at Sisterhood Collective, you can find out more on our Instagram, or you can sign up to receive our weekly newsletter and let the good times continue to roll. Now it's time to turn your clear vision into bold action. I'm Laurie Drummond, your host, and until next time, keep striving to live that best life. Take care, and we'll see you soon.